We are gathered on this Yom Hazikaron as we do as a community each year. And it is an appropriate time for us to reflect on the heroism of the soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces and on all of those civilians who were murdered al Kiddush Hashem. And I would like to share with you a personal encounter that I had just last week. When I was in Israel, I went to Efrat, to the shiva house of the D family, and there were hundreds of people pouring in and out of the home. In fact, there were marshals who were there to be able to direct the crowd. Such was the outpouring of solidarity and comfort that came from every part of the country into Efrat and to the home of Rabbi D and his family. And I had the opportunity to talk to Rabbi D. We were sitting directly across from each other. The area was a tented area just outside their home to accommodate all the hundreds of people that were there. And he was talking with a microphone so that everyone who was present could hear him. And then he gave it to me to speak, and we engaged in a conversation at that moment. And it was a conversation that moved me in a very deep way, and I want to share with you the contents of that conversation here this evening, because I think it teaches us a lot about what Yom Hazikaron truly is. Rabbi D, and I was moved by this, was speaking, of course, about the horror that his family had been through with the murder of his beloved wife and two daughters, a horror and a grief and a loss which is unthinkable, unspeakable, unimaginable for any of us here. And do you know what was on the top of his mind at that moment? I can only talk about that moment that I was with him. At the top of his mind at that moment, and what he spoke about to me and to the hundreds of people who were gathered in our conversation that we had, was the fact that the world was not recognizing the evil of those people who murdered his wife and daughters, that there was not an unequivocal condemnation, a declaration that there is nothing, there is no excuse, there is no politics, there is no cause to justify that kind of inhumanity and that evil. That what was top of his mind. Where are the voices of the civilized world? A person who's been through so much. That was his clarion call at that moment, and it's something which he spoke about during the course of the shiva in many public gatherings, at the funerals. And we need to hear the voice of Rabbi D. We need to hear it. But indeed, our fellow countrymen here in South Africa needs to hear it. The South African government needs to hear it. Civilized people all around the world needs to hear it, because if we cannot condemn evil and call it by its name, unequivocally, without caveats, without conditions, and to condemn it outright, then human civilization is indeed in jeopardy, and Jewish history has taught that. Rabbi D went on a campaign in the days after the funerals to call on the world to recognize the parallels between the fight against the evil of Nazism and the evil of this religiously driven terror that seeks out innocent human beings to murder in cold blood. The only difference is the scale, but the evil intent is there. And it is so important for the safety of the world and for the honor of the victims of Yom Hazikaron that we realize this, and civilized people all around the world stand together because evil in the world can only be defeated if it is identified as such. And we need to acknowledge as we stand here, Yom Hazikaron, to pay tribute and to remember the victims of the fallen soldiers and those who have died in the endless terror campaigns against Israeli citizens for the only reason that they are Jewish, and to realize that it may have been different. There may have been, and there could have been, no wars. In 1948, when the State of Israel was declared by David Ben-Gurion, its founding prime minister, when the State of Israel was declared based on the United Nations resolution, if the Arab world would have welcomed a Jewish state, a tiny Jewish state on a slither of land, there could have been not 75 years of war, but 75 years of peace. And we need to acknowledge and to realize what has been at stake and the battle that has been fought to defend civilized values, to say that Jews can live in the land of our forefathers, in the land that God promised to us, in the land of the Bible. Jews have a right to live with dignity and with safety. If that had been recognized in 1948, the Middle East and all of the entire region could have been a prosperous place filled with joy, with unity, with human dignity for all. It could have been so different. And that the battles that the Israeli soldiers fell in, and that our civilians fell in, all of these battles were a battle against forces of evil that sought to wipe out the Jewish people. Not satisfied that Hitler was unable to achieve his ultimate goal, there has been attempt after attempt after attempt. But peace could be tomorrow. But that will require the entire civilized world to stand up and say enough of the evil. As King David said in Psalm 120, where he says that Ani Shalom v'chi adaber heima lemilchama. I came for peace, says King David, but they came for war. We have Yom Hazikaron because we came for peace, but others came for war. And so we pay tribute to the fallen soldiers and the martyrs. And we, as a community, as a country, as Am Yisrael, as the Jewish people, and indeed all civilized human beings in the world, need to say enough is enough. And to say it is time, as we stand and pay tribute to those who have fallen, to say let the forces of good come together to defend human dignity, to spread peace, to spread love, to create a world which is filled with harmony, with beauty, and with tranquility. May this be God's will, and let us say Amen.